To help them through the pandemic, many businesses that lease property have been granted rent concessions by their landlords to support them through. Now, before the pandemic, FRS 102 didn't explicitly specify how to account for changes in lease payments resulting from rent concessions. So to avoid having businesses interpreting FRS 102 in different ways, the FRC had to act fast to issue an amendment to FRS 102 looking specifically at COVID-19 related rent concessions. The amendment to FRS 102 was issued in October 2020. It applies only to rent concessions given by landlords as a direct consequence of COVID-19. Now, prior to this amendment, businesses may have looked to treat these rent concessions in the same way that lease incentives, such as rent-free periods at the beginning of the lease, are treated, and spread the benefit over the remaining life of the lease. But this amendment says you don't do this. These concessions were specifically to help businesses out during the pandemic and are therefore temporary in nature. And so they should be recognised in the P&L in the period that the concession is intended to compensate. So effectively, you recognise the reduction in the rent charge as it happens. Now, there are certain conditions to be able to apply this treatment. Firstly, the change has to be a reduction in rent. And the amendment as drafted in October 2020 says it only applies to reductions in rent payments which were due on or before the 30th of June 2021. However, the FRC have just issued an exposure draft, FRED 78, in which they propose extending that period by a year to 30th of June 2022. And the other condition is that there has to be no other change to the terms of the lease. Otherwise, the rent concession could be said to be due to those changes rather than just COVID-19. There's also a disclosure requirement. You need to disclose the change in lease payments in the accounts. And the effective date for this amendment is periods commencing on or after 1st of January 2020, but early application is permitted.